Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Negative Attitude Not Needed. This will be a bit long but satisfying. To set this up, I used to work as a manager for a construction company that primarily took jobs in the public sector. Think government sites, universities, police buildings, etc. The owners were cheap, like to a fault. I had previously pointed out some issues with using certain materials that were subpar or weren't standard for our jobs so that the owners could beef up their profit margin. I was told to be more of a team player, and was basically shuffled off to other small, dead-end jobs. I continued pointing out issues on jobs and eventually was let go and told to take my negative attitude somewhere else. So I did. Well, before my departure, during my last month, I was working in the office and noticed the company had put all their eggs into one basket and were bidding on multiple jobs at a university campus nearby. Shortly after I was let go, a manager whom I used to work with, who now worked for that particular university, got in contact with me and offered me a job as a construction compliance officer. Part of my job was to rewrite their very old and outdated construction specifications. I rewrote them all and made sure to include very precise wording, as this was considered a legal document as they were part of the tender contract. As you can guess, these specifications were included in all contracts going forward, including the 5 that were awarded to my previous employer. Being a compliance officer, I'm not involved in the tender, bidding or awarding process for contracts, so they had no idea I was watching their projects. Fast forward 6 months and I've been by their sites, all of them, and they had continued to use their shortcuts and subpar materials, but this time they were in violation of their contract. We had a progress meeting, over Zoom, for one of their jobs, and I sat quietly, with my video off until the point at which I was asked for my report. Their faces were priceless when I turned my video on and introduced myself. I outlined, in detail, all of their shortcuts and deficiencies. The project manager, who was one of the ones that had a hand in my firing, argued that there was no issues with them using these materials, methods, and that's how we've always done it. Which was a perfect answer. I had their contract and had highlighted the part outlining the compliance with our own specifications as code. There was also a clause included stating if they didn't comply, they would not be paid their final 20% of the contract, which was basically their entire profit margin. Also, since they had said it was how they always did their work, we investigated all their sites and had them remove all their materials that were in violation of the contract and fix the deficiencies, at their cost. Fallout. Someone that I keep in contact with at that company told me they needed up losing money overall on all their jobs with us, and they ended up firing the entire management team, including the project manager that had a hand in my firing. Although I don't like to see people lose their livelihoods, these people should never have been in their positions. Sometimes you just have to take your negative attitude somewhere it's appreciated. Edit. The contractor still has jobs at the campus, and we both actively try and help each other for the best outcome for both client and contractor. No grudges held. Next one is titled, I tried to make up a way out, I really did. Once again, pulling from the very deep, well, that is my time as a supervisor for a major cable TV, internet company. This takes place in about 2006, where I've just received a transfer from one of our agents. We have a customer that insisted on a supervisor the instant they called in. Those can be annoying, but also have the potential to be fun. Here we go. This guy starts off by spending the first 10 minutes giving me crap because his wife tried to call in earlier for help, and we wouldn't help her because her name wasn't on the account. Well, that's policy, and no amount of, you should know she's allowed because she's my wife, will change that. It's just a full-on rant about how dumb our policies and agents are for causing him all this trouble of having to call in with her, over and over in a circular profane complaint. I don't end calls for profanity. It means they're going to be the interesting calls that I like. Eventually, I finally get the info I need to get into the account, including security verification from him. Now, my wife's trying to install that free antivirus you guys have on your website, but it says it needs the company name, email address to do it. I don't have one of those, so you need to figure out how to make this work. She's right here on the line with me and we're both staying here until we get this ducking program installed. Yes, we were giving away an antivirus program, or at least a year of it, free to our customers in some partnership with one of the bigger companies in that field. Sir, you do have one of those. It's created by you when you first sign up, but that was a few years ago, so you might not remember it. That's no problem, I'll look it up for you. I don't remember signing up for that. You guys probably dug it up somewhere. Like I said, no big deal at all. I'll help you through it. You can change it if you want, or never use it again after this, or whatever you want. Now, I've found it, and it does say it was set up by the customer and it looks like it's been used a lot, just not in a year or so. For security reasons though, I shouldn't give it to you while she's still on the line. Could you possibly have her leave the line for just a few seconds? This is not true, but you'll see why I tried. I told you already, she's my wife, she can do whatever she wants with this account. Can't anybody there listen and do their ducking job? She's got a pen right here and she'll write it down, and then we'll see about installing the ducking antivirus. You're sure I should say your address out loud while she's on the phone? Yes. This is getting ridiculous, you know that? Just ducking, tell us. Okay. The address you set on this account is secretgaylooking4more@companyname.net, not the actual address. I tamed it down a bit for Reddit, female voice for the first time I'll call. Again. Are you fucking? And right there the call drops. I forgot to save the account number so I could look it up later and see if anything more happened, but I can imagine. Next one is titled, Strictly Stick to the Work Hours and Top an Hour Extra? You have it, boss. This happened just before I quit my last job, some 4 years ago. I was working with the largest IT company in my country. It is known for being employee-friendly, with very relaxed working hours and good perks and emoluments. However, the delivery head of our project, our boss, had a totally different outlook. Officially we were supposed to work from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., but nobody stressed about it because clocking in a total of 45 hours a week was the only compliance required. Personally, I liked to work till late, less traffic while returning, so I'd go to work by 10 to 10:30. The client never used to bother us before 11. Not very disciplinary on my part, one no, but that was the general trend in that company. This boss guy suddenly decided to become draconian about punctuality in office hours. Everyone is expected at their workstations by 9. Nonetheless, all of us complied, saying, if 45 hours is the only rule, so be it. Q. Malicious Compliance 1. Now, since in my team I was the last person to leave every day, I had voluntarily taken up a few extra technical responsibilities that needed to be addressed only after everyone signed off and after the client was done for the day, which was never before 8. As you can guess, it immediately became chaotic when I began, reaching at 9 and leaving at 6 every day. Needless to say, the boss was helplessly out of his wits and had to stay back himself most of the nights for a week to wrap up the closing tasks. Yes. He always used to leave by 6 before this. He was neither much acquainted with the SOPs, nor could he gather aid from any of his staff, so he really found himself in a mess. They could have simply reinstated our work hours. Instead, this is what they do one fine evening. Boss, why are you leaving now? Me. I'm done for the day. It's 6:30 already. Boss. Who will do the technical responsibilities? Me. But then I'd have to stay for another 2 hours. Boss. Okay, let's see. During the last 1 month you have come to work after 10 every day. That's 20 to 22 hours of deficiency. I couldn't decide if I should laugh or be infuriated at his nonsensical statement. Me. But I've worked till 8:30 p.m. every day, so not only that's incorrect, but I've actually worked 20 to 22 hours more, for which I should claim overtime payment. Then why didn't you? Dismissing, anyway, that's a separate topic altogether. From tomorrow you're either coming an hour early or staying an hour late, for a whole month, to compensate for your deficiency. Q. Malicious compliance too. At that time I was preparing for another high-paying job in the government sector that requires an immensely tough competitive exam to be cleared, for which I needed to put in a lot of effort and time into studying and researching. The exams were due in a month and I was struggling with the latter as I used to return late. So, I saw this as the optimal opportunity, a kill two birds with a stone situation. I decided to comply. Well, I began to clock in at 8 every day, study and research vigorously for an hour without any disturbance, using the company's internet, printer, stationaries and whatever other utilities required, and managed to be ready with my work by 9. For a whole month I fueled my exam preparation from the company's resources, and yes, I claimed full overtime work hour payment too. To be honest, a lot of times I used to feel guilty about this, but the pleasure I got from submitting my resignation letter after I got the job I was preparing for, was a wholesome, out-of-the-world feeling. Edit. Yes, I am from India, and this post is about a company based in India. Next one is titled, "Okay, I'll be there at 8:30 every day." This happened several years ago. I worked for a company that provides software for cell phone companies. We made voicemail, SMS messaging, etc. There were smaller companies that didn't have the staff or data center to handle these products, so we had a group called hosting that connected to the customer's network and provided the service. I and my friend would usually come into work at about 10 a.m. and just stay until our work was done, usually 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. We enjoyed our jobs and each other's company. We worked hard and were the backbone of the team. One day, the director calls us into his office and tells us that business hours at this company are 8:30 a.m. until 5 p.m. and he expects us to arrive on time from this point on. While my friend was a bit frightened, I said, "Okay, that sounds great." The director asked what I meant, so I said, "If you're setting our work hours, that means no more unpaid overtime. You will see a cloud of dust swirling above my chair at 5:01 every day from now on." During our next staff meeting less than a week later, the director tells us that he has decided that our group will now have flexible hours because he trusts us to get our work done. Last one is titled, "Can't you just unload around me?" So this happened earlier today and was too perfect to not share with you guys. I work in construction as the foreman for a new house build. The location is kinda strange. The house is 250 feet up a hill via a footpath only. All of our materials have to come up this footpath by hand. It's a pain in the butt to manually carry, quite literally, an entire house up this hill. One of our saving graces is having the 2 parking spots on the street at the bottom of this hill marked with official no parking signs. Unfortunately, there is an elementary school about half a block away, and the parents of children seem to regularly, at least twice a day, think it's okay to park in our spots. Now I consider myself a reasonable person, so if someone is parked in the spots and we don't have a delivery or a need to park a truck, I will let it go. If we need the spots and there's someone parked there, however, I will ask them to move nicely, and most of the time they do so immediately. Until today. I get a phone call from the lumber delivery truck that is en route to our location. He says he'll be there in about 2 or 3 minutes. I let him know I will meet him at the street and make sure he has space to park. He's carrying all of the material to frame the roof of our house, which is a lot of really big lumber and will take easily an hour to bring up the hill, so naturally I didn't want him parked in the middle of the street with his hazards on for an hour, when we have a perfectly good parking spot for him. As I begin my trip down the hill, I notice there is a school parent sitting in her car idling. Assuming she's just waiting to pick up her child, I walk up to her car and politely let her know that she is parked in a no parking zone and we really need her to clear it to park a delivery truck. She scoffs at me and rudely states back, "I'll just be a few minutes, and your truck isn't here, take a chill pill, dude." Before I can respond, a giant lumber truck comes around the corner and I wave to him, and then gesture towards him to the woman in the car who has now put her window back up to ignore me. I put on my best customer service smile and wave at her through the window. She put it down halfway and angrily shouts, "What?" By now the truck has pulled up alongside her car and I politely ask her again, with a stronger tone of voice, to move her vehicle, reminding her that she is illegally parked in a tow-away zone. Then she gives me this wonderful idea. She says, "Can't you guys just unload around me?" Jesus, it's not that hard. I give her another smile and walk away, a brilliant plan forming in my head. I instruct the delivery driver to park as closely to her as possible and block her in with the porta potty that is at one end of our reserved spots and the parked car that is parked just adjacent to our spots on the other end. He smiles because he immediately gets what I'm trying to do, and proceeds to expertly block this lady and her car into a little two-parking spot jail. We unstrap the lumber and my guys begin humping material up the hill. Meanwhile, I call the police parking enforcement to let them know the situation. At this point in time, I wasn't trying to get her in trouble. I just wanted a record of why we were blocking part of the street so we don't get in trouble with the city. The very friendly traffic officer lets me know that she can be there in about 30 minutes and deal with the situation for me. Wonderful. As we continue to unload lumber, the child of the parent shows up, and wouldn't you know it, mom is just now realizing that the lumber truck is parked so close she can't get out of her driver door to meet her kid. She awkwardly clambers across the inside of her car and stumbles out the passenger door, shooting glaring looks at me and the truck driver in the process. She loads her kid into the back and then begins to realize that she has no way of leaving. She comes storming up to myself and the driver and states, "I'm in a big hurry. You need to move your damn truck right now so I can go." Before I can respond, the driver gets a grin on his face and says, "Ma'am, in order to unload the lumber on the truck we had to unstrap it, and per our company policy I'm not allowed to move the truck with any unsecured load on it. Sorry." This sends her into near aneurysm levels of blood pressure. Meanwhile, I can barely contain my laughter. "Duck your policy, I have somewhere to be." She barks back at him. At this point, with impeccably convenient timing, the parking enforcement officer shows up and parks behind the truck. She doesn't see the officer arrive, and while the officer is still getting out of her vehicle, I just casually say, "Can't you just pull out around it?" It's not that hard. With the biggest shit-eating grin I've ever had, I watch as she realizes that I just used her line on her. "Duck you," she yells, and storms back to her car and angrily clambers back in through the passenger door and into the driver's seat. At this point, the officer is walking up to myself and the driver. Before she can even introduce herself, the mom in the car slams it into reverse and stomps on the gas, crashing into our porta potty and knocking it over, and then throws the car into drive and tries to mount the curb and drive on the sidewalk. The officer, driver and I are staring in disbelief as she gets halfway over the curb and gets stuck. I can hear her screaming obscenities over the idling truck from inside her car. The officer promptly walks up to the door of the car and orders her out. My favorite part of the entire thing is watching her face go to shock as she realized she just did all of that in front of a police officer. She gets slapped in cuffs as the parking officer calls for a second unit, and she is promptly sat on the very curb she tried to drive over. She sits on the curb yelling to the now two officers about how we told her she could stay there and that we never asked her to move. The traffic officer responds that she was the one who was originally called when she first refused to move and that she already knows what's going on. While myself and the driver are giving a report to the second officer, my guys finish moving the remainder of the lumber and the driver finishes his statement and takes off to go back to the yard. By the end of the ordeal, she was arrested, charged with child endangerment. Her kid was in the back of the car the whole time, reckless driving, destruction of property, the porta potty, and driving on a suspended license. On top of all that, she also got her car towed. The kid went home with his grandma and she went to spend some quality time in a cell. I never expected her to actually heed my advice to just pull out around it. But I think next time she'll probably think twice about parking in a tow-away zone, if she ever gets a license again. Thanks for listening.